Thank you, Reverend Lori. That was very nice. You stole some of my material. But good for you. So as the eldest child, my role is to tell you about the beginning of her life and some of her early years. So my mother, Lucinda Jane Hoadley, was born June 3rd, 1926, to Esther and Fremont Hoadley. She grew up in Naugatuck, Connecticut, and was the eldest of 3 children, with younger brothers Calvin and Bruce, who's my namesake. After graduating high school in Naugatuck, she demonstrated her sense of wonder by seeking further education as one of the few women of the time that went on to attend college, attending Connecticut College and graduating with a degree in economics. Following her graduation in 1947, her sense of adventure had her moving to the Turtle Mountain Indian Reservation in Belcourt, North Dakota, where she taught Chippewa students in the 4th grade for 2 years. In 1950, she returned to Naugatuck, where she taught 2nd grade at the Salem School for 2 years. As you can already see, Lucinda was a strong supporter of education and was a lifelong learner herself. From 1949 to 52, she enjoyed her time away from teaching, seeking further adventure, traveling the countryside by bicycle, and staying at youth hostels. During this period, a friend that she had met while teaching in North Dakota on the Indian Reservation told her about a fellow that she had met at a summer interracial workshop in Washington, D.C. that Lucinda really had to meet. He was attending the Yale University Divinity School, which was nearby Lucinda's home. Eventually, they did meet, and that was it. Lucinda married Robert Mark Brashares on May 31st, 1952. Upon Bob's graduation, they made the bold move to California, leaving their families behind on the East Coast and the Midwest for the promise of a pastoral assignment at a little Methodist church in West Van Nuys, California. After settling in their first parsonage, Lucinda had her first of 4 children, Bruce Merrill, me, and Betty Ann. Lucinda made her family and the raising of her children her top priority while juggling the new responsibilities of being a pastor's wife. Beginning with the West Van Nuys assignment, Lucinda wrote the book on being a pastor's wife, serving the church in a multitude of ways at churches in Alhambra, Las Vegas, La Habra, Scottsdale, and Escondido. Her main interests were in Sunday school and in the United Methodist Women, which we'll be hearing more about. And then I had a great quote about how she liked working with children, which you've heard. So that's good. In 1957, Lucinda and Bob took their first of many family trips to Yosemite, starting many decades of trips to Yosemite for a moment with nature and a place to reflect and recharge in God's creation. Those trips grew from curry cabin camping to backpacking to later RVing through our national parks. It was a pure manifestation of her love and appreciation of nature and a commitment to the conservation of our planet. You'll hear more about our family history in Yosemite, and you'll understand why it will always be a special place for the Brashares, and it is where Lucinda's ashes lay with Reverend Bob's. In 1962, Reverend Bob was transferred to be the head pastor at First Methodist in Las Vegas, Nevada. Lucinda went double or nothing on the family with the birth of 2 daughters, Julia Esther in 62 and June Ellen in 64. Hope I can give your birthdays out. Speaking of the Jays, as the Brashares refer to them, here is Julia to continue with Lucinda's story as the family moves again, this time back to California and La Habra, California.
Okay. Yes. Okay, so in La Habra, Lucinda was active in her children's schools, the church, and in environmental groups. She was always there for us in the afternoon after school. And while she made dinner, she usually listened to NPR News on the radio. Even as a busy mother, she was engaged with social issues. Mom didn't buy grapes for a time, and she explained to us kids that she was boycotting grapes to stand with the United Farm Workers. She did everything she could to foster our spiritual, intellectual, and emotional growth. She taught us to be independent thinkers and told us, never let other people run your lives. She saw the value of artistic enrichment, and she enrolled June and I in art classes, ballet, and music lessons. Mom purchased a piano, and when I didn't stick with the prepaid piano lessons, she jumped into them wholeheartedly. And she was always open to learning new things. She was an avid cyclist, hiker, and nature lover. In 1972, when Mom was 45 years old, she and Dad decided it was time to truly get out in the wilderness. And we took our first backpacking trip. And this began a 10-year stretch of family backpacking trips in the Sierra Nevada mountains. The summer that Mom turned 50, we climbed Mount Whitney, the highest mountain in the continental US. After 10 years living in La Habra, Bob was assigned to a church in Scottsdale, Arizona. Lucinda loved the desert landscape and was an active member of the church's hiking group. And in 1980, Lucinda joyously welcomed the birth of her first grandchild, Nathan, born to Terry Sackett and Bruce, a brother who was just up here. Lucinda was thrilled and called her grandson the Wonder Boy. 1977 was a difficult time for our family. After years of struggling with mental health issues, Lucinda's daughter Betty died at age 21 by suicide. Throughout this challenging time, Lucinda's faith and inner strength enabled her to continue to be a loving, encouraging mother and to meet her responsibilities. Lucinda was courageous in lovingly speaking the truth. A memory I have from my teenage years will illustrate how Mom's inner strength would manifest in how she lived her life. We were camping in Yosemite Valley over the 4th of July weekend, and we went to Sunday worship in the little chapel. And one of the hymns we sang was Battle Hymn of the Republic. As the congregation began to sit down after singing the hymn, I noticed Mom remained standing. She then asked the minister, "Would it be all right if I added some context to the hymn we just sang?" After he said, "Okay," Mom said, "The Battle Hymn of the Republic was written at the dawn of the Civil War by Julia Ward Howe. After she witnessed the horrible reality of the war with its destruction, misery, and death, she became an advocate for peace and spent the rest of her life working for peace." Mom then sat down. Mom and Dad took their first international trip in 1982. As was mentioned, they went to the Holy Land in Egypt, and this began a 10-year stint of travel abroad, which included numerous European countries, China, and the Soviet Union. After a decade of living in Arizona, Lucinda and Bob returned to California in 1985 for my father's last pastoral assignment in Escondido. Lucinda volunteered at the Interfaith Crisis Center and at times offered women lodging in her own home if the shelters were full. Lucinda also volunteered as a tutor to teach English as a second language in after-school programs. In 1992, there was a big change in the lives of Lucinda and Bob, and they departed on a new adventure. And my sister, June, is here to tell you more about that story.
Yes, in 1992, Bob, my dad, retired after 44 years of being a minister, and he and my mom decided they would move into a house on wheels and travel the country. So they got a big recreational vehicle to live in, and they got rid of a lot of their possessions. Lucinda thought it might be hard to give up the many things she'd acquired over all the years, but she said as she started getting rid of stuff, she found it liberating. And they traveled in the RV into Canada, and they went all over the United States, crisscrossing the country a few times over. And when I would visit them at some of the campgrounds they stayed at, my mom would happily show us around, and she'd tell me all about the nearby campers. She seemed to always have had at least a friendly conversation with most of her short-term neighbors, and she could tell you a lot about what they had shared about their lives. She was interested in people. She listened to them and cared about them. She would often say, "Everybody has a story," and she'd encourage everyone to listen to other people's stories, as she found that people's stories are fascinating when one is interested and listens as she did. They enjoyed living life on the road. They visited beautiful places, and they reconnected with family and friends, some of whom they hadn't seen in many years. And Mom said her and Dad got reconnected as well, being together in the close quarters of the motorhome so much of the time. And she wrote a poem about her motorhome living, which you can read out on the display table. After 6 years on the road, they settled down, moving into an apartment in northern San Diego County. They were still rabble-rousers. For example, they organized the other tenants in their apartment to get the city to put a bus stop outside their apartment complex. And they went to peace marches. And they also took day trips, sightseeing. They frequently used their membership at the Wild Animal Park. They were active in the Escondido Church, and they enjoyed their apartment swimming pool. Lucinda really got into the water exercise classes daily. Yet all us kids, we were up here in Northern California, so we convinced them to move here. And in 2011, they moved to Oakmont in Santa Rosa. Lucinda liked the beautiful natural scenery there, and every day she expressed appreciation for it. To her great joy, in 2012, she became a great-grandmother when Odessa was born, and then came Ezra in 2013. She had always cared about the future of the planet, and now she was even more motivated to support climate efforts, and eagerly went to a rally so she could hold her sign, "Another great-grandmother for climate action." My dad's health had been declining, and when it was apparent that he had dementia, in acknowledging the situation, Lucinda made a conscious decision and declared, "I've decided I'm going to be happy." And she went forward, deliberate in being happy and loving to him. And she continued with it when their health made it necessary for them to move to Brookdale-Pauling Creek to receive separate care and live separately. After he died, after 64 years of marriage, she had to deal with the strange feeling of being without him and the grief. She held her faith, and she put effort into being positive, staying engaged and active, and continued building her life at Pauling Creek. She was up for outings, whether to art trails or hiking trails. She did a final trip to Yosemite, and she made a trip to Seattle to see those great-grandchildren and their parents. She would put a lot of creativity into cards she gave, adding many personal touches of art, wordplay, and humor to give a special relevance for the recipient. She appreciated having her church community, the friendships she'd made at Pauling Creek, Ari on TV, music, poetry, and us family and friends. She had such a calm, gentle strength. Even as she dealt with recurring cancer, going through numerous treatments, lots of doctor visits, and surgeries. She loved life so strongly, and she was not fearful of death. To her last days, she marveled and expressed gratitude for us and the view of the trees and sky out her window. Words can't adequately express our love for her. So we are going to give everybody a chance to share your thoughts, and we'll ask folks if you want to speak to stand, and if you move towards the center aisle, we will bring the microphone to you.